Hello, myself Rupali Gupta. Today I'll be discussing the topic of Keynes' psychological law of consumption. This law explains the mathematical relationship between two major economic variables, one being consumption and the second one being income. Consumption and income are two macroeconomic variables which are directly related to each other. This law gives the basis for consumption function, which is also known as Keynes consumption function. Before moving ahead, let me clarify here what is consumption in this context. Consumption in this context implies that part of income which is used for the purchase of goods and services. And we very well know that there is a behavior among the people that when the income of people increases, the consumption also tends to increase. So as the income increases, consumption increases, and when the income declines, the consumption also declines. This same behavior has been observed by Keynes and has been given as a hypothesis. When we speak about the statement, it clearly states that when the income of an individual increases, the consumption also tends to increase, but by a lesser proportion. This is the most important point in the law. We very well know there is a direct relationship between these two variables, but the change over here is this: when income of consumer increases or individuals increases, the consumption also tends to increase, but by a lesser proportion. And why is that so? Because if we just generally observe in a usual scenario, if a person is there, if he has his income and what he was consuming previously, if today the income increases, he will consume comparatively more, but he will not increase the consumption to such a great extent that he will not have savings. And it's very clear that certain wants, certain requirements of an individual would have been satisfied earlier. If there is an increase in income, a person might have certain fantasies towards certain products and he may purchase only them, which is extra out of the required budget, out of the planned budget. But he will not make sure that he takes away all the income just by spending madly on purchasing things. Hence, we clearly say over here that when the income of a person increases, consumption also increases, but by a lesser proportion. If income increases by 100%, the consumption will increase by less than 100%, not equal to 100%, not more than 100%. Moving on. Propositions of this law are as follows. When the aggregate income increases, the consumption expenditure also increases, but less proportionately. This is the same point what we discussed in the previous slide as well. If there is an increase in income by 50%, the consumption expenditure will increase, but by less than 50%, not more than 50%, and not equal to 50%. Second proposition is that when there is an increment in the level of income, it is divided into both spending and saving, and when there is an increase in income, both the components consumption and savings increase simultaneously. These are the very three simple propositions of this law. Moving on further to assumption. This law can only be applicable under certain constant conditions, and they are: first one being invariability of psychological and institutional factors. Now there are certain institutional and psychological factors like taste, preferences, customs, population growth, market structures. These are assumed to be constant, and under these constant conditions within the short run we expect the law to apply. And the second one being laissez-faire policy, where we say there is no government intervention or interference in the economic policy designing or running of economic system. And the third one being a free capitalistic economy. The economic decisions or the economic changes have been taking place because of the market forces, not because of the government. And the last one being, this law applies only during the normal conditions, that is conditions free of any kind of economic, social or political disturbances. Moving on further. Illustration of law. In this law, we explain the consumption function. The consumption function is C is equal to f of y, that is C is function of y, which implies consumption is function of income. where we say that income is independent variable and consumption is dependent variable, because income, if there is a change in income, the consumption also changes. If income increases, the consumption increases. If income decreases, the consumption also decreases. Hence, the change in consumption is dependent on the change in income, but change in income is independent. Hence, we call income to be independent variable and consumption to be a dependent variable. Coming further, the law has also stated that income is subcategorized as consumption and savings. Any individual, for that matter, who earns income does this subcategorization, where a part of income is used as consumption and a part of it is used as saving. And when income changes, there is a simultaneous increase in both the components consumption and savings. With the same consumption function, we also come across two other components, one being APC and the second one being MPC. Looking at the first one, APC, average propensity to consume, which is nothing but the ratio of consumption to income, which indicates what is the proportion of income that an individual spends for consumption. Suppose a person has an income of 1000 rupees and his consumption is 800 rupees. Here the ratio is 800 by 1000, which gives us a numerical value of 0.8. Now what does that 0.8 indicate to us? It indicates that this person spends 80% of his income on consumption and rest 20% is as savings. This is the meaning of APC. So it indicates to us what is the proportion of income being spent on consumption and what is the proportion which is getting converted as savings. Coming to MPC. MPC is the ratio of change in consumption to the ratio of change in income, which indicates what is the change in consumption which happens because of change in income. If income increases, what is the percentage change in consumption? Now suppose the person's income has increased from 1000 to 2000 and hence the consumption has also increased from 800 to 1200. In this case, the change in consumption is 400, change in income is 1000. Hence, we get a numerical value of 0.4. What does that indicate? It indicates if a person's income increases by 100%, there will be increase in consumption by 40%. Now, the same has been displayed with the help of an example in a tabular format where we take three components: income, consumption and savings. Now, as we have assumed before, there is constancy in psychological and institutional factors. Hence, we assume the change in consumption to be consistent all throughout and change in income also to be consistent all throughout. Now, suppose if the income in the economy of an individual is zero, the consumption of an individual is greater than zero, not less than zero, because it is a common human tendency that even if we don't have income, we cannot stop consuming. Desires, demand are endless. Whether we have income or not, consumption will be on. Hence, it leads to dis-saving. So, in this example, we are saying the same scenario, the same psychological condition, where even if the income is zero, the consumption will never be equal to zero. It will be greater than zero, which results in dis-savings. As the income increases from 50 to 0 to 50, the consumption also increases from 20 to 60. In this case, consumption is again greater than income, as a result of which we don't have savings in the positive value, rather we have dis-savings. And when income increases from 50 to 100, the consumption also has increased from 60 to 100. In this case, as income and consumption are equal to each other, the savings are zero. They are absolutely nil. And when income increases from 100 to 150, the consumption also increases from 100 to 140. For the first time, we see the savings being generated as income is more than the consumption. And as further the income increases from 150 to 200, 200 to 250, the consumption also increases from 140 to 180, from 180 to 120. Simultaneously, there is also an increase in savings. The same thing has been reflected in the diagram. In the particular diagram, you would observe two upward sloping lines, one blue and one red. The blue one indicates equality between income and consumption, which implies if there is 100% increase in income, the consumption also would increase by 100%. But that's not true in reality. This also reflects another myth to us that when income is zero, consumption is also zero. But it is not true in reality, because even if income is zero, consumption is never equal to zero, which has indicated by this red line, which is nothing but the Keynes consumption function, which indicates that with the increase in income, the consumption increases, but lesser than the income, which has been clearly indicated by this red color line, which starts not from the origin but from above the origin. Now, when we speak about this point E, what does that indicate? It indicates equality between income and consumption, which says that there are zero savings, and the area OAE indicates to us dissavings, that is income less than YE. If there was income less than YE, the consumption would be more and income would be less, which would have caused dissavings. But after this equilibrium point, that is E and YE, if the income increases, there will be simultaneous increase in consumption as well as savings. If the income increases from YE to Y1, the consumption also increases from EYE to C1 Y1. And further, if the income increases from Y1 to Y2, the consumption further increases from C1 Y1 to C2 Y2. Similarly, we also observe an increase in savings. With the increase of income from YE to Y1, the savings have increased from 0 to AC1 and further from AC1 to BC2, and hence as the income increases, both the components savings and consumption keep on increasing. This itself is the illustration of this law. Now, moving on to the implications of this law. When we speak about the implications of the law, firstly, this law invalidates Say's law. Say's law says that supply creates its own demand. But according to Keynes' law, when income increases, consumption increases less proportionately. In that case, there is always a chance that there will be overproduction or glut in the market. What has been produced is not completely consumed in the market. Hence, we cannot say that supply creates its own demand. This is the first implication of the law. Implication implies the importance of the law. What does the law imply on other economic concepts or economic behaviors of other variables? Coming to the second one, it also emphasizes on the need for state intervention. When consumption does not increase in the same rate as income increases, there could be a problem of unemployment or overproduction, which can lead the economic growth to reduce. And in that case, if someone can correct that, that is state. So it also makes us understand that without the state intervention, there cannot be successful running or successful progression of an economy. Hence, the concept of laissez-faire also fails out in this context. Thirdly, we also emphasize on the importance of investment. When income increases, the gap between consumption and income keeps increasing, which can cause fall in demand, fall in effective demand, which further leads to unemployment. But this can be avoided if there are introductions of new investments in the economy, which would generate new employment opportunities, and there would be a shift in consumption function. Hence, through the law, we also understand that the situation of unemployment, underemployment can be avoided if good importance focus has been given to the newer investments. Coming to the last one, it is very helpful in understanding the turning points of business cycle. When people fail to spend the full increment of their income on consumption, this leads to fall in demand. It leads to overproduction. It leads to unemployment. The marginal efficiency of capital, that is MEC, declines. And this leads to a downturn in trade cycle. Conversely, when there is an upturn in the economy, that is when there is an upturn in trade cycle before reaching the depression stage, how is that possible then? Keynes' psychological law also states very important phenomena that even if the income is zero, the consumption is never zero. The same concept applies here. Even if the income falls, the consumption falls less proportionately. And this behavior of people in totality does not allow economy to reach depression stage, and it allows the nature to revive on its own pace with newer investments introduced in the economy. These are some of the major implications of this law. Now coming to the determinants of consumption function. When we speak about determinants of consumption function, we categorize them into subjective factors and objective factors. Subjective factors are internal in nature, endogenous in nature, and subjective factors differ from one person to another, whereas objective factors are exogenous or external in nature, and a change in these objective factors have a totality impact on all the consumers or all the individuals in an economy. Now coming to the first subjective factor, demonstration effect. When we speak about demonstration effect, we are saying that when a group of people try to imitate another group of people's consumption pattern, whenever there is an increase in income, the consumption also tends to increase. Hence, when a community is trying to imitate others, with the increase in income, the consumption tends to increase sharply. In case of security motives, when there is a situation of insecurity, when people are not sure about their future, in that case, even if the income increases, the consumption does not increase sharply, rather savings increase. If I have to be more precise, in case of citizens who are in their old age, when income increases for them, they don't prefer consuming more, or they don't prefer spending more on consumption, rather they prefer on saving because they are insecure about their future. Coming to business motives, those who are in the business sector, they always feel that when there is an increase in the income, they would reap that increased income or profit onto their business again. Hence, when the income in the business enterprises increases, rather than using it for consumption, they save it so that they can further invest it. Lastly, being improvement and development motive. Usually people have a tendency that when their income increases, they always focus on improving their economic status or social status. In such cases, people would save more because they would be thinking of purchasing properties in future, home or jewelry, which could increase their social status in the economy. And coming to the objective factors, the first one being income or the wage rate. If the wage rates in the economy collectively increase, there is increase in consumption and savings also. Coming secondly to the fiscal policy. When government brings about changes in fiscal policy like reduction of taxes, both direct and indirect, there will be an increase in the consumption scenario. And when we speak about windfall gains and losses, suppose a person has incurred windfall gains, or economy has been experiencing boom situation. In that case, there is a collective increase in the income, which also increases the consumption and savings. When it comes to distribution of income, if in an economy income has been equitably distributed, the increase in consumption will also lead to increase in income would also lead to increase in consumption. But if income has not been equitably distributed, then the MPC would be less. And coming to last, that is the changes in the rate of interest. If rate of interest is higher, then people are more induced to save rather than to spend. Hence, with the increase in income, the consumption wouldn't increase so sharply as much as the savings. These are the determinants of consumption function. This is all about Keynes' psychological law of consumption. I hope you liked the video. If you like, kindly like, share and subscribe. Thank you. Happy learning.